Hi everyone, this is Jamie and welcome to another episode of the Yogi Within podcast. Okay, so on today's episode, we could say that this is a continuation of the theme a little bit on the subtle body. And, you know, like I said previously, I've done subjects specifically on more of the physical aspects of yoga, and these last few episodes we're going a little bit more into the subtle energies of the body and the philosophy and really the use of our imagination in yogic practices as a way to connect with these unseen energy channels within our bodies. Now, today's episode I'm going to call maybe the stages of yoga. I'm going to break down a little bit of what my experience of yoga has been, not from a hierarchical perspective, but more from the different stages that I've gone through personally, and also how this relates to the Ashtanga yoga system, but also other meditative practices that I've been studying for the last, 10 to 20 years, and what's the best way of wording it? How we can see this as new practitioners or even people that have been practicing for some time, how this relates to your own journey within yoga. And maybe me sharing my own perspective on this might help some practitioners understand where they're at in their own practice, but also, what our intention is with these practices and what we might be noticing in our body, our subconsciousness, and how that might be playing out practically in our physical life. So I'm going to break down what it's like in the beginning, and again, how this changes over the years, because it does change if you allow it to change, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But when we first come to yoga, I would say it's a very physical thing. Yeah, we're very much, most practitioners, I would say, when they come to yoga, are very disconnected from their bodies. And you could look at my previous episodes on this as a way to understand some more specific aspects of this, especially from a physical level. But I would say that if you're disconnected from yourself and your body, which I think a lot of people are these days, especially when I see new people come into the yoga room, it can take some time just to develop that connection. Excuse me. The material world, the modern world, we're very busy. We're very busy in our lives these days. And, when we first come to yoga, it's a chance for us to reconnect with ourselves in a non-judgmental and a non-competitive way. Yeah, this is what a good yoga room should be like. So this could be our first entry. And, lots of us come to yoga for different reasons. A lot of the time it's just we want to feel better. We have some back pain or this, that, and the other, or maybe we're stressed and we need a calm space to reconnect. There's a myriad of reasons that we come to yoga for, and I've discussed this plenty on previous episodes. So when we first come, a lot of this is new to us. Yeah, the language that's used in classes, the energy in the room, how the teacher might be with you on a physical and energetic level. And, a lot of us come in, I would say, quite closed. Yeah, we're quite closed and shut off energetically. Yeah, I'm not talking about flexibility or how strong you are, but I mean on an energetic level. Yeah, that we're not really open to some discussions, and we're not really open energetically in our body. And this is something that I pick up on a lot, observing different people and different practitioners that come in and out of the room. And I would say one of the goals in yoga is to open these energy channels and to open ourselves up to these different philosophies and these different ideas of how we view life and ourselves. I've gone over this quite a lot on the previous episode in the subtle body and the Bandha episode, if you want to check that out. So, when we first come, we could say that something needs to open. Yeah, something needs to change, something needs to shift, and that could be for lots of different reasons. Yeah, stretching the body, moving the body, connecting with your breath. This changes you. Yeah, over time, this changes you on a physical level. Yeah, and that change over time starts to change you on an energetic level. Now, I know for some people, these concepts can be difficult to get your head around. And again, when you're new to yoga, it can be too much, to be honest. You know, listening to someone talk about this in a philosophical way, it sounds like airy-fairy, wishy-washy stuff. And, you know, we just want bare bones yoga. We want to come in, move, stretch, and we don't want to hear all this nonsense. And I totally get that, which is why a lot of beginners, this language and the way of speaking isn't really relevant, because we're not really open to this way of thinking, and we're not really open to this way of seeing ourselves. And it doesn't mean that, I don't mean this in a negative way or a judgmental way. It's just, it takes time for practitioners and for people to start to allow themselves to think and view themselves in this other way, and to actually see these concepts as a real thing. Yeah, I'm gonna put myself out here and say that. Yeah, like, my experience of doing this for many years is this is a real thing. Yeah, when you start to think of yourself and you see yourself shift differently on an energetic level that you can sense and feel, you know it to be true. Yeah, it's something you build up over time, where this becomes a very real, concrete thing that you can sense in yourself. And this takes time to cultivate, which is why in the beginning, you know, really it's just enough being in the room, moving, breathing, stretching, and just reconnecting with yourself, understanding what your body feels like, understanding what's going on in your body, being embodied, not disconnected, not somewhere else, not somewhere else thinking about something else, planning something else. You know what most of us do most of the time. We're thinking forward or backward. We're mostly not in the present moment, and we're definitely not in our bodies in the present moment, which is why things start to go amiss, and we detach, and we, you know, disconnect from the sensory feedback of, you know, being a human, an embodied human. Yeah. So this is like, we could say, the first stage, and maybe you start with meditation in this period. I remember when I first started meditating, it was extremely difficult, you know, just to sit and be still and be quiet. I found it fascinating, you know, different kind of colors or different things I would see, but mostly it was a very superficial state, I would say, when I first started meditating, just to control my mind, you know, just to be still and not let my thoughts run away from me, and, you know, trying to control the monkey mind, trying not to think things popping off everywhere. It's a very erratic space when we first start coming into these practices, which is why, again, it takes time to slow everything down and for you to have more control over your mind, so it's not running away from you. So these states of practice can take some time to cultivate, and I would not be in a rush to do so. In my experience, the depth of your yoga practice isn't how quickly you do it. But again, it comes back to intention. Yeah, it really is about the intention that you're doing these practices and what you're looking for. Now, again, going back to the beginning, our intentions can be very different. And, you know, for a lot of us, it's probably just good enough to be in a room, breathe, move, be calm. And, you know, intentionally, that might be enough for us, just to feel a bit better, feel a bit calmer, and to have less pain in our body and better mobility. This is one of the many benefits of yoga, and I'm not going to list all of them because I'm sure I've done that plenty on this podcast. This is going to go more into the subtle energy channels and how this changes over time. And this is what I think of within the realm of depths of practice. Like I've said previously, if you just want to be strong and flexible, I mean, there are lots of different practices you can do that. And, you know, different forms of gymnastic and dance and other kind of calisthenics you can do. And, you know, they're fun and they're interesting, but yoga is completely different. Yeah, the intention of practice, why you're doing it, and the inner work that you do that comes later, to me, is a sign of how deeper your practice is going. And over time, in my mind, that becomes the main focus, and it becomes a much stronger focus in your practice, where you're much less focused on the physical. Again, go and check out my podcast on the subtle body for a more of a breakdown of my philosophy on that. Now, although, stretching and strength work, we could say, isn't necessarily a goal, the asana is a big part of that, which is why I continue to practice the Ashtanga yoga system. And as I've said in previous episodes, what changes in the body can also change in the mind, and can also change on a consciousness level, yeah? This rebalancing of the body, this shift in the way we see ourselves, and the way that feels when we're moving. Now, again, I've gone into more details on this in previous episodes, but this is a sign that your yoga practice is starting to evolve and it's starting to change. You're not just coming into class and stretching and doing strength work, yeah? Something starts to shift at a deeper level. Things start to become more clear. As I've said before, things from your past come up. The way you see yourself starts to shift and change, and we start to break down these concepts of who we are and what we're about. Now, this can happen at a very deep level, depending on how far you want to go into this. I believe that we aren't necessarily what we see on the physical level, yeah? We see ourselves in a physical form, in the mirror, when we see each other, we meet other people in the street. We see the reality of the physical world. But the more you go into yogic practices, the more you start to sense what those things are on an energetic level. And the deeper you go into that, the more you cultivate what that sense is. Now, we have our eyes to see things, we have our hands to touch things, and we have our ears to listen to things. We have these other things within us that give us feedback in a different way. Tantric yogic practices cultivate what that feels like. Yeah? You start to make and feel a deeper sense of reality based on what this feedback feels like. When you're practicing yoga, when I'm practicing Ashtanga yoga, with the intention of deepening this, yeah, my intention with my yoga practice is to deepen those tools, yeah. In the beginning, we're not really sure what we're doing. We're going in, we're breathing, we're moving, we start to feel good, things start to move around, emotions start to change, old feelings start to shift, and we start to feel lighter. We start to shift our perspective on things, and we're less consumed with what's going on in our mind, and we're much less in a sort of trauma, stroke, panic, stroke, stress response to life. Yeah, life is very demanding. Yeah, just the things that are always pulling on us to shift our way of thinking, our responsibilities, generally takes us out of these states. Yeah, life is busy. Yeah, some people's lives are extremely busy, but it's very difficult to focus on these deeper sensations when you're so consumed with the material world. Yeah. Those things have to shift. As I've said previously, if you're full of anger and resentment and bitterness and negative thoughts and feelings, it's pretty much impossible to focus on these types of energy channels within the body, because your mind is so consumed with the past or the future, and it's trying to figure out and understand things that you haven't really conceptualized before. And in my view, this is necessary to clear. So part of the beginning stages of yoga is clearing this, yeah? It's like I said, it really is a detox, a cleanse. If the Ashtanga system is practiced correctly, or vinyasa yoga, for example, this happens. Those feelings get shifted. You understand why you felt that way, when you felt that way, and you come to some kind of understanding of your past and what drives you. You understand who you are at a deeper level, and you start to shift your perspective and how you see yourself. This is, again, stages. This can take time, depending on what your life's been like. Some of us have had harder lives, and some of us have to do a bit more work to understand ourselves at these deeper levels. It takes some time, and potentially working with someone, a specialist in some areas, to help us understand ourselves at a deeper level. This is just one aspect of understanding our psychology. The other aspect of this is from a societal level, yeah? As I've said before, there's so much put on us from a societal level that we think is really part of us. But actually, it's really not. Again, when I think about the way really I look at people these days is much more on an energetic level. Forget what nationality someone is, or what color they are, or what hobbies they do. These are superficial things that allow us to connect or dismiss people. On an energetic level, you can connect with people in a completely different way if you're open to this. Yeah, if you're open to meeting people in that way, rather than what we see on a material level, this really shifts the way you see relationships and the way you meet or avoid people. Yeah, it's very common. I do it. We all do it. It's not wrong. So maybe you meet someone who shares a similar hobby to you, or maybe they're from the same part of the world, and there's an instant connection and a click because you share similarities. But in a way, that can be quite superficial. Some of us, when I've met different people on a completely energetic level, it's a different type of connection. And I think that some of us, are much more open to that and actually looking for that. And that's definitely what I'm looking for when I meet people, when I meet different types of relationships. I'm looking for that energetic connection that has got nothing to do with country, origin, hobbies. It's just something you feel. It's something you sense. It's almost a love connection with someone. There's an openness that you share, and you're meeting on a different vibration. To me, this is fascinating. It's fascinating when you meet people that are open in this way and allow themselves to meet other people in this way. It's a completely different type of sensation, and it's a completely different way of connecting with another human being. I am completely drawn to this. Yeah. In Buddhism, they talk about this in the sense that from a reincarnation perspective, which is why they don't kill anything or don't eat meat, in the sense that, maybe that's someone who's close to you who's come back in a different form. Because, if you go into that at a certain level, reincarnation, or how we might re-enter this world in a different way, it's got nothing to do with countries, flags, origin, skin colour. It's completely just consciousness being transported and moved into a different realm and being manifested in that way. And being open to that, and being open to the idea of that, makes you see people and different connections with people in a completely different way. Whether you believe in reincarnation or not, it's not really important. It's more about how you see people and how you meet people on an energetic level. That's got nothing to do with what political party they're associated to, or what football team they support, or whatever. Any of these kind of things that might make you shut that connection down based on some stereotype or some sort of idea that you have about people, but purely on an energetic level. This can be also true in romantic relationships, yeah? So yoga opens these channels up. Yoga opens you up to the ideas of this. It removes these blockages in the body. Now, if you're listening to this and you don't really conceptualize what blockages might be, in yoga we talk about this in terms of prana, or life force, blood, energy, whatever you want to call it. But things get stuck in the body and the mind. Now, we as humans reduce things, yeah? We reduce things to blood, muscles, nervous system, mind, emotions. But if you break that down and think about the complexity of what it is to be a human being, not separating things, just think of the idea of something being stuck. Forget what it is on a physical level, forget what it is even on an energetic level, but just the idea of something being stuck. We've all felt this in our body. Try and do yoga after you've had an argument with someone, yeah? Or if someone's died and maybe you did yoga the next day, or maybe you had some great news and something spontaneous happened in your life, and then potentially you did your yoga practice that same day. Or you're in love, you've fallen in love and you're in that love state and you do yoga. These practices will all feel completely different based on what sensations are going on inside your body, in you. Yeah, forget separating the mind and the physical body. They have an effect. Yeah, emotions have a weight to them or a lightness to them. These things we feel, some of us feel them more strongly. Having a daily or a regular yoga practice makes you much more connected to that. It makes you much more aware of the changes that go on, and it makes you much more aware of what causes those changes, which is the main reason I have a daily yoga practice, is to observe those changes so that I become proficient at understanding what those changes are and what made them happen. You become embodied. Again, it's like a tuning fork. You're tuning that fork to become sharp. So you're fully aware of what's going on inside you, and you're understanding what those changes are, and then you become much more aware of what you need to change for those things to move. You don't want things to be stuck. Things are better in the body, ourselves, our energy levels, when things are moving and they're flowing. When they get blocked and they get stuck, whether it's on a physical level, emotional, psychological, whatever it might be, you know it. When you have a daily yoga practice, you feel it, you sense it, and you become very aware of what that is and what caused it. This to me is a superpower of life, because you become much more in control of how your life is going, and you're not just, confused when things go wrong. It's not mysterious. You know what's going on inside you. You sense it, you feel it, and you're aware of it, and you become much more adept at knowing what to change. This, to me, is a life skill, and it's a tool that you can use to make better choices in your life. I'm not going to go too much into that because I've said this many times on this podcast before, but it's an excellent tool for doing this. So when these channels get open, and really you start to know yourself better, you start to know what drives you, you start to become much more aware of what your desires are, and from an energetic level, not from a societal level, not from a family model, and you're not trying to copy or replicate something. You start to become more authentic. This, you could say, I would say, is another goal in your yoga practice, is to remove the masks. Yeah, we all do it. I used to do it a lot. We put masks on to fit in to certain social rooms, to get different jobs, maybe to get liked or to get some sort of affection, or even romantically. Some people wear masks to get love, support, power. We all have done it. We all do it at some level. But I would say the deeper you go into your yoga practice and these energies start to get rebalanced in you, you start to become more aware of what that feels like. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to not be yourself. You start to sense when you are and when you're not, and you start to live more authentically, because you're aware that the more authentic you are, the more honest you are with yourself, the different how that feels in your body. It's a sensory felt experience, yeah? If you're just in your mind, You can tell yourself any story there is and convince yourself it is true. When you go into your body, it's a completely different experience. Yeah, the body doesn't lie. Yeah, you can't lie to your body. You can tell stories all day long to yourself in your mind and convince yourself of anything, but in your body, this will not be true. Which is why I trust my body in a way more than my mind. Your mind will create lots of different stories to make you feel safe and to make you feel more confident and to give yourself some sort of comfort. But really, the body is the ultimate sensory feedback for what the truth is. You can sense it, you can feel it, you can't ignore it. It's in the pit of your stomach, it's up the back of your neck, it's in your low back, it's in your hips. You start to sense when things feel off, and you become very aware of when you're lying to yourself. And you realize that lying to yourself, deluding yourself, and falsifying your ego has got nothing to do with advancing in your spiritual practice. It will just hold you back. When your intentions are true and you're pure in your intentions of what you're doing with your yoga practice, you will choose truth and light over delusion. Yeah. Even though you might lose out on something, monetary, friends, jobs, you start to use that as your compass. Yeah, your body, the sensory feedback of your body, these embodied practices that we're talking about, you realize that by magnifying your ego and choosing things that are delusional, create blockages. Yeah, it creates friction, it creates tension, and it kind of increases bad karma. Yeah, and you can sense that and you feel it. So you start to choose not to do that. You start to make better choices. Yeah. These choices that you're making that improve your life have a massive impact. And you start to live your life by a different code in a way, yeah? Because as I've talked about in the subtle body, you start to sense when things feel off, this state of bandha, yeah? That state of bandha becomes your moral compass. It becomes the thing that guides you, drives you, and the thing that you're looking for. You're looking for that balance between those types of energies. And the longer you do yoga and the deeper you go into these practices, these tantric practices, ashtanga yoga, it doesn't matter if it's ashtanga, but these different tantric, movement practices, breathing practices, meditative practices, you become an expert in breath, movement, and sensing when these energetic balances are off. And you can see the impact it has on your life, and you can see how much of an impact it has on your life when that balance is right. When you're balancing these two energy channels that you can sense and feel in your body. Again, in the beginning, this is not something that's going to make much sense to us. Yeah, we don't really understand what that feels like. It's something we haven't used before. Yeah, again, I haven't got a picture to give you. I can't say it's your physical eye or your ear. It's something you can feel and sense in your body. I can't draw a picture of it, but you can feel it. And the longer you do this, and the more you focus your attention on this way of observing yourself and others, you start to sense what that feels like, and it becomes a very real thing. Yeah. Same way you can feel bad energy in a room, or you might sense something's wrong. It's a sense, it's something that is beyond what I would call the physical. It's subtle energy channels. It's something you have to practice, and you have to start observing it. And I've said this many times on this podcast, you are what you practice. If your intention in your yoga practice is to find balance and to go into your body and listen, this is what you start to cultivate, and you become very good at it. And you start to make choices based on this, I could share something on a personal level in some way. That a good example would be how I've had romantic relationships since practicing yoga. I would say that the more you practice love, the easier it is to fall in love in a way, yeah? Because you get better at it. You get better at being in love. You get better at practicing love. You become more vulnerable. It's quite often when practitioners come to yoga, they're not vulnerable at all. They're very closed. There's something that shut them down, shut that energy channel off, and it's a closed door. Yoga is a way of opening that up again if you allow it to. And when I've met women since practicing yoga, I would say it's been completely different. Yeah, I don't know what it's like these days with dating apps and things like that, but the women I've met, it's been completely spontaneous. And if you would have showed me a picture of these people prior to meeting them, I might have said that they weren't my type, or not. This is not in any way being judgmental or anything like that. I don't mean it in that way. It's just that it's a feeling. Yeah, you meet someone, lightning strikes, and it's like bang. It's on an energetic level. It makes no sense. It's magical, but when you feel it, and you're absorbed by it. You just, boom. It's just lightning strikes. And I would say I was much more open to that feeling. I was much more vulnerable. I was much more in a space of sensing what that felt like. And also I would say the women I'd met during those periods were also in that same headspace, yeah, where boom, magic happens, lightning strikes, and it's just a vibrational thing. It's got nothing to do, in a way, not even physical, yeah. It's not, like I say, I could say that maybe if you'd have shown me a picture of these people, I might have been like, maybe, I'm not really sure, it wouldn't have been like a thing. But meeting in person and being in each other's radius and being open to that connection, boom, lightning strikes, magic happens. And I would say the way I met women completely changed after, practicing these yogic practices, because I think it changes the way you see people, and you're much more open to people, and you sense what it's like when you meet someone else that's on the same vibration. Whether you're compatible or not is a different story, and other things can change that. Societal things, family things, monetary things. There's lots of things that can make a relationship work or fail. But I've always been fascinated, especially since practicing yoga, of the energetic feeling of meeting someone you're attracted to. It's worth being alive for that feeling. Yeah, that is definitely one of the joys of being alive and falling in love in that way, being open to meeting someone in that way. So I think that, again, you become better at sensing what that feels like and allowing yourself to go to those spaces. So, after doing this for some time, after doing this slowly for some time, things start to break down. You start to see yourself differently, you move differently, you think differently, you're more open to certain things. Potentially you've let go of lots of things that were holding you back, lots of things that were blocking you, ideas about yourself, stories you've told yourself. These start to fade away. This is what happens, it breaks you down. Most of my yoga practice has really been about letting go of things, ideas, old things, concepts, some relationships, some people. It's really been a practice of letting go and kind of stripping things back to start to see yourself really as you are, on an energetic level, without the mind, attributing different things to it, but just really seeing yourself truly as you are. And as I've talked about on many episodes, this is just a natural thing that happens from going deeper into yogic practices. You start to just strip yourself back. It's like peeling layers of an onion and another layer and another layer, and it's quite scary sometimes, depending on how deep you want to go into this. Like I've said before, these attachments to identity and seeing ourselves in certain ways can be very strong. But if you really want to go deeper into yoga, you have to be courageous to go there. What I mean by that is that there will be resistance to that change, and that resistance can be felt in the body, and it can be felt in different ways, which is why I think you need a good teacher, especially in the beginning, to help understanding what that feels like. Because resistance in the body and resistance in aspects of your life can be confusing, especially if you're a daily practitioner and you're going, much deeper into the Ashtanga yoga system, for example, or forms of Buddhism or meditation. You need someone to help you understand what's happening, what's changing. Are you going to allow that change to happen? Are you open to it? Again, it depends how far you want to go into this. I changed my whole life because of this. I was drawn to the idea I had was, what would it be like to live my life based on listening to my intuition? This was something I set out to do many years ago. It was an objective I had, I was doing lots of different, you could say, tantric practices at the time, different meditative practices. But the goal was, I was experimenting a lot with spontaneity, making different life choices, and doing them based off intuition. Not based on money, not based on anything, really. I was basing it off of gut feeling and intuition, and I was seeing where it led me. It's led me to lots of different places, and I've ended up here in Norway, which is why it's a little bit dark, even though it's not too late, because the night's drawing in a little bit. But to me, this was an active experimentation through yoga practice to see where life would lead me if I let my intuition lead it. I was trying to be authentic. That's what I was trying to practice. That's what I still try and practice, is how can I live my life as authentically as I can if I let my intuition lead me, even though it's scary, even though I might lose a lot of things, even though it doesn't make any financial sense. This was a choice I made some time ago, and I'm not saying that we all need to do that. What I'm saying is that you'll have a lot more depth in your practice the more authentically you live. It doesn't mean you need to do what I did. That was necessary for me. And it was fun. It was an experiment. It was scary, fun. It had lots of different emotions. But over those years, I got a much deeper understanding of who I was, what I wanted, and what I was looking for in life. And I think that yoga, legit, authentic yoga practices, teach you how to be more authentic. They teach you how to listen to your intuition so that you make better choices. And when you're vibrating at a different level and you meet people who are also on that other level, you want more of that. You get tired of superficial relationships. You don't want superficial conversations anymore. You're looking for depth. This is what I've been searching for, really, in my life and my yogic practices, is depth. Not really been looking for superficial relationships or practices. My nature really is like that, is to find something and just go fully into it. I'm interested in exploring things at a deeper level. Relationships, practices are the same, and I've been looking for that. One of the reasons I left London, there's lots of reasons I made different choices in my life. I was looking for deeper relationships, and I think we all want that. We all want deep, connected relationships. It's nice to feel vulnerable. It's nice to open ourselves to people. It's nice to trust people. And again, when you meet other people who are on this certain vibration, where it's not competitive, it's not egotistical, it's not controlling, it's just love, It's just a love vibration. When you meet people in that space, it's like a drug, You just want more of it, because you realize that there's these depths to connection. When you've experienced it, when you've connected with another human being in that way, you want more of it, I would say modern day life kills that a little bit. We're so busy these days, planning, rushing around. it stops that connection at some level. It kind of inhibits it, especially if you're disconnected from your body. If you're running around like a blue-ass fly, like we say in England, running around from here to there, pillar to post, and not taking any time for yourself to connect and be embodied, I would say, this becomes more superficial, more disconnected, more disembodied, and more away from what I would say is our natural state. Yeah, I don't think that's our natural state. I think the idea of modern life has created this illusion that this is what we should strive for, but I don't think it's our real natural state, and I don't believe it really makes us that happy. I think we're happier when we're more embodied, when we slow down, and we have stronger, more open connections with people. We feel more love, we're more in our natural state where we feel more love and compassion for people. We're not competing with people, and we have more time to embrace people and feel close to people. So we could say that yogic practices take us down this road and open us up to these ideas and these concepts, and we start to see our dear self in a different way. And I would say at some point your mind starts to become more free and it's more open to these concepts. And then we can start going into more, of the subtle body. Like I said on the previous episode, it's very difficult to go into the subtle energies of the body when your mind is so consumed with the material world. You need to be able to have that space within you to explore this in a free way. You have to allow your imagination to go to these places. You have to allow your imagination in these meditative practices, in Tibetan Buddhism, ashtanga yoga, for example, or Vajrayana tantric practices that allow your body and your mind to explore these subtle energy channels so that you can understand what it feels like. So we have to clear everything so we can get to that space. Some of us, we're all on a different journey. We're all on a different path, and how long is a piece of string? I don't think about it in a goal in that way. But some of us, it can take some time for that to feel different so that we can drop into these spaces. And I would say that's what it would feel like, is you allow yourself to drop in to a certain space where you're not consumed with, pain, trauma, fight or flight, or just generally the material world, where you allow yourself to be present, embodied, and you understand what it feels like. You have to practice it. You have to practice what that feels like, what it feels like to be in sync with yourself, to live more authentically, to be in sync with your body. You're not fighting your body, you're not fighting yourself, you're not resisting yourself. There isn't this tension, there isn't this resistance, you're in line with yourself. Now, it's funny whenever I talk about this, because I'm always doing this with my hands, because it's a feeling, Balancing these energies out is a sensory thing. Trying to find this midline, trying to find this state of bandha, and knowing what that feels like, and knowing when you're in that state, and knowing when you're out of that state, and knowing what things bring you back into that state, and knowing what things take you out of that state. This could be relationships, work, you name it. There's lots of things that take us out of that vibration. When you know what that vibration feels like, that love energy, that connected feeling, you just want to stay there all the time. And then you get better at fine-tuning that, knowing what takes you out of it. Like I've said in previous episodes, life can be challenging. There's lots of things that take us out of that state. But I view yogic practices will teach you how to know when you're out and what you need to do to get back in, back into that connected flow state, Now, in yoga, we talk about prana, this life energy, the sushumna, this main energy channel, the nadis, where this energy flows. In ashtanga, we talk about tapas, this inner heat that we create. In Tibetan Buddhism, we call it tumo. So there's lots of different practices to generate this internal heat, bandha, this way of using our muscular system to connect with the different parts of our bodies. There's so many different cultures that have explored this in different ways with different terminology, but they all really have the same goals, especially in tantric yoga practices, where we're cultivating this connection to this central part of our body, which is where, again, the magic happens. Yeah, this is where the focus starts to go, and we start to sense what that feels like. And I think that they all come at it from different ways. Ashtanga yoga, like I've said before, is just a tool for that. Yeah, lifting, jumping, asana, breath work, stretching. It's just a way to bring you into your body, and with the right intention. Tumo in Tibetan Buddhism, or in Zen practices and different parts of Tai Chi and different parts of aspects of Southeast Asian practices, they're all similar. Yeah, they just have a slightly different methodology as a way to bring your consciousness and your brain into this certain aspects of your central nervous system and this central channel of your body. And once you start to sense what that feels like, my practices are around cultivating that mostly. It's mostly around cultivating that these days and making that stronger connection. But again, this is the stages element to this. I mean, it changes over time. I did an episode, I don't know when it was, a little while ago maybe, about stopping yoga. And, something happened in my yoga practice where I came to the end of it. That's what it felt like. And I didn't think about stopping in the sense of not doing yoga anymore, but I knew that, you can go and check this episode out, I'm not going to go into too many details, but I knew that the thing I'd got into it for had finished on a energetic level, something that came up from my subconscious. I knew that I'd come to the end of something, and I knew that the main reasons I'd come to yoga from a psychological perspective was over. Yeah, this was a very transformative part of my yoga practice, and I intrinsically knew if I was going to continue, it would be for a different reason, or it would have to change, because otherwise it would just be breathing and stretching, and that wasn't enough. It's like, it's great for the body, but I knew that I was going to enter a new phase, and I had to be open to that change. And that change happened, and then my yoga practice just went much deeper. It went much more on an energetic level, subconscious level, and my focus shifted to, I'd say, where it's more at these days. And again, I think this is different for all of us. We all experience these different shifts in our yoga practice over time, and our idea of what we're doing shifts and changes. But you have to be open to that. You have to allow that to change and allow the different layers to peel back. If you're a super asana performative yoga practitioner, maybe that will last for some time, but how long are you going to do that for? At some level, things have to shift and change. It's just about listening and knowing what you need to change and when you need to change it. I think we all go through these at different stages, but for me, this was a really big shift, and things started to happen at a much deeper layer inside my body, where I started to connect with these energy channels at a much deeper level. It was just it felt like a natural evolution to what I've been doing for so many years. And I would say that took a really long time for me. It was I've been playing with this for a really long time, but I think it's mostly intention. There was a shift that had to happen, but that shift only happened when I could move on from all of the other stuff. It was just a natural evolution. So I'm not going to go too much into the masculine and feminine stuff. I've talked about it a lot on the previous episodes, but it's mostly around balancing these energies out. And I think really coming to this place in our meditative practices where, your mind is clear, you're open to these different aspects of yoga, and you allow yourself to drop into these subtle channels. I think that The Ashtanga yoga system is an excellent heat physical building practice, and it's great on so many levels. But I would say you definitely need a meditation practice. They have to go hand in hand. How much time you have for both is, we all have to weigh that up, like how much we commit to different things. But we have to, I would say that it's necessary. I think it's necessary to go deeper into the energetic parts of the mind and our subconscious. I've mostly practiced, Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, and that's been my main vehicle really for going into these meditative practices. And, what's on from that? What is it I don't want to say what's the goal, but that's the best way to word this. In our mind, I would say that we think that we feel good generally from external things happening to us. And this is true. We fall in love. We know someone else in our life that when we're around them, we feel good. Or we get something new, something happens in our life, and that generates a good feeling. Sometimes we can be very attached to those things, and then we can suffer when those things are removed or they changed. And we could say that part of Buddhism is to bring awareness to what that suffering feels like, or what it feels like to not have something, or when we lose something. I would say that the deeper aspects of yoga, we could say aspects of Tantric Buddhism, or maybe even things like the 6 yogas of Naropa, these different methodologies to break down our consciousness, to see things in a different way, I think open our mind up to what a bliss state could feel like. Where do our thoughts and feelings come from? When we have a thought or a feeling, when we feel a good sensation, where does it come from? In my mind, it all comes from the same place. I went over this a little bit in the episode on shunyata and this concept of emptiness. Now, when I've had discussions with lots of different practitioners about this before, some people can feel that Buddhism is quite nihilistic in a sense, or that it's just brutal. I've heard people say that to me before. In my perspective, Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism has been the closest explanation I've received on the concept of reality. And not because I'm a Buddhist, because I'm not a Buddhist, I'm just studying. I'm not anything really. I've tried not to be associated to things too much in that way. I mean, the same way with Ashtanga, I think it's good to be able to be loose so that you know when it's time to let go of things and not be too attached to things. But for me, Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism has been one of the best examples to try to describe reality. And I think that when people hear terms like everything is suffering, or this idea of emptiness and nothing, people can have this negative association to that, and that in some way this is a nihilistic view, and that this is a really kind of awful way to view the world. And my experience of going into this after so many years of yogic practices and meditation is it's the complete opposite. When you feel what that masculine and feminine energy feels like, when you can sense what it feels like when they come together, what you start to conceptualize is that comes from the same place everything else does. And you start to get a sense of how that's created, because it is a creation. You can create a good or a bad feeling in your body and your mind quite quickly. But the reason I'm saying this is that you start to have a better understanding of where your thoughts and your feelings come from. And you start to become better at observing when and how they happen. When you can generate that yourself, when you can sit still in silence and generate a really loving energy within you without anything else, you can create a blissful state. You can create a loving state, a compassionate state, just by sitting and being on your own and breathing on your own without any other input. You realize that you're much more in control of your emotional state, and that you're not necessarily in need of an external source to make you feel happy all the time. Don't get me wrong, this is not a detachment thing where you don't need anyone. What I mean is that you become much more aware of your own ability to feel good. The same way the ashtanga system teaches you an ability to heal yourself, yoga, meditation will teach you how to heal your body. It will teach you how to make your mind calm, and it will enable you to create a loving, blissful state by yourself. This is a massively powerful tool system. When you're able to create that energy on your own, that will pour out of you. That energy, that vibe will spill out, and it will affect everyone around you in a positive way. And then you realize you're able to do that on your own. This is a really beautiful, powerful group of systems that teach you how to find loving compassion for yourself and others very easily, in a way. You could say it's simple, to just think of loving, peaceful, kind thoughts for yourself and others. We could say that sounds like a very simple thing, but actually in the beginning it's not. It's very difficult. One of the things I think is one of the hardest things for people is just stopping saying bad things to ourselves about our things, about ourselves. I mean, just that alone will have a huge positive effect on your life. Just being kind to yourself, saying positive things to yourself about yourself. As I've said on previous episodes, you can't fake that though. You can't fake it. If your mind and your body is full of negative energy from all sorts of things, it has to be cleared. It has to be cleared so that you can embody this love state by yourself. And this is why I believe lots of practitioners go off deep into spaces on their own just to cultivate and practice that, because if you know how to do that on your own, you need to find a place where you can concentrate that. The world is always pulling and pushing us from pillar to post, and that energy, that really good energy you've created, or like when you go to your yoga studio and you get, you're working with your teacher and your fellow students, and there's that super good energy that's created in that room. You want to try and maintain that through your day, which is why I'm an advocate of morning practices. It's great to start your day with that good energy, and then you can carry that throughout your day and maybe affect the people around you in a positive way. But we want to try and cultivate that on our own, and we're able to maintain that. So in a way, you can practice yoga all day, in a way. It's not just on your mat. That energy, that love energy you've created, you want to try and carry that with you so that you have that throughout your day. And I think that these practices help you cultivate that. Now, I'm going to not wrap this up in a minute, but it's interesting to think about this, because I remember a yoga teacher I used to know many years ago. She was a lovely lady. She had her own studio somewhere in England. I'm not going to say the specifics, but she was an interesting lady, put it that way. And she told me once that she was seeing this guy, and I think he was a Buddhist practitioner. And, I'm sure he was a lovely guy and he had this lovely energy. And she said that, he would basically meditate more or less all day and just create this kind of blissful state. And, But she got really pissed with him because, basically he wasn't paying any bills. He wasn't really doing his, so we can't all sit around and just meditate and create blissful states all day. Some of us have to go to work and integrate in society and do these other things. It's just, this is what I mean about living authentically. Yeah? I think the more authentic you live and the more in line with the choices you have, I think you make better choices, and maybe even the kind of work you do and people you interact with is a higher vibration. Yeah, you like going to work, you like what you do, the people you interact with, help raise that vibration a little bit. And I think yoga really, essentially, makes you very good at boundaries. So you're very, very good at being aware of your energy. You've spent all this time creating this good energy, and you don't want to lose it. So you try to maintain it and hold it, and you're aware of things that draw on it. Like I said, you break down societal responsibilities, family responsibilities that aren't serving you anymore, and you become much more aware of when these things start to shift and change. But I think I'll just wrap this up. Actually, it's getting on for an hour, and I'll wrap it up with something a little bit more around, I guess what you could say is our Buddha nature. We would describe this in Buddhism. What is our Buddha nature? I would say that there's a state you can be in, maybe even in your yoga practice actually. There's a state I can be in for sure in my yoga practice. And there's a state you can be in your meditation practices. There's a state you can be in when you're out and about doing things, yeah? We've all felt this at different stages. It's that kind of love vibration, yeah? You feel connected. Your mind's not on the past or the future. You're very much embodied. You're in the present moment. And you can find this kind of, not neutral, but again, this balanced state where your energy levels are right. I would say an extreme level of that is when you're in love and you have the feeling of being in love. This is like the highest state, I would say, is when you're in a love state. Yeah, this is the best. This is the best feeling you can have, I think, as a human being, is when you're in that love state. In Buddhism, they'll say you'll reach this kind of clear light state, which is what you could say is essentially maybe this love vibration, but without the need to control it. And you also might find this state in your meditation practices. You might find this state when you orgasm at periods of your sleep, and supposedly upon dying. There's this state that you might enter in Buddhism that that is called the clear light. Now, what is that? Now, in a way, I think it's not so good to conceptualize it with words. I think, again, this is something that is more of a sensory thing, yeah? The way this has been explained to me and taught to me is almost by trying to identify and break it down into words, you almost break the connection to it. It's this non-dualistic thing again, yeah? What I think about is this energies again. I view these as opposite energies. I view this as this opposing energies where masculine meets feminine. You can think about that in different ways depending on your sexual orientation, but really these opposing energies, but when they come together, there's a state that's found in that state. You could think about that when you're in union with someone and maybe you reach this orgasmic state. There's a blissful state that happens when these two energies combine. Now, you could argue, or some religious practices will argue, that could potentially be your natural state without society, without the material world, without responsibilities, without everything else that we have imposed on us, is your natural state, this kind of clear light state, where you're in this, I don't want to call it neutral, but you're in this centered space, yeah? Everything else takes us out of that. even maybe even being alive and being in our, our egotistical mind, or, where we're viewing things in very much in a materialistic way, but on an energetic level, we could say the concept of clear light is where we're in this natural Buddha state, where we're in a blissful state, and everything else around that kind of takes us in and out of those different states. I talked to a previous teacher about this once, as whether this was possible to be in this state for forever or whatever. And, I don't think in my lifetime, I don't think in many people's lifetime. It's interesting to think that some practitioners might have been able to embody that state permanently or for long periods. I don't know if that's actually possible. I've never met anyone actually that's actually kind of achieved that state, and I don't know if we necessarily want to, but I think it's interesting to think about it from a concept of that could be our default setting in a way. Our default setting could be this very embodied, clear, blissful state, and it's everything around us that takes us out of that. And that certain practices, certain tantric practices, yogic practices, enable us to get closer to that state and enable us to be more in line with that state and experience vibrations that are closer to that state, where we feel more love and compassion for people. That's enough, I think, yeah? To feel that more in our life is enough. And we can feel that on our own, yeah? When you clear these blockages, these channels, and you open yourself up vibrationally to seeing things in this way, I believe you can experience that state much more often. And I think it's infectious. I think that being in that state is infectious, and it affects the people around you. Yeah, we all know what that's like. When you're around someone who's angry and bitter, you know what that feels like. When you're around someone who's blissful and loving, you know what it feels like. It's magnetic, yeah, has a certain vibration, a certain energy to it. Yeah, I think that it's interesting to think that we can achieve that on our own. In a way, I was going to say just by thinking about it, but in a way it's by not thinking about it. Yeah, it's dropping in. It's allowing yourself to be in a state that you potentially are already in or could already be in, but everything else that's going on in your mind is taking you out of that state. It's a bit hard to put into words, really, and I think that's why these things are quite difficult to discuss, because as soon as you start to put it into words and conceptualizing it with words, it kind of breaks down what it might feel like. A good example of that, actually, this just comes to my mind. I was doing mushrooms once with a girlfriend of mine, and in the forest, and the worst thing you can ever do is to try to describe and talk about what it feels like to be on psychedelics, because you're trying to use your mind to describe something that you're experiencing that is not a mind thing. And I remember we talked about it later, and we agreed that the worst thing you could do is to try to describe to someone the experience that you were having. You just have to be there. You just have to embody it and feel it, and you don't need to explain it to someone, because again, by explaining it and putting it into words, it kind of kills it in a way. It's a bit like describing what love feels like, or the taste of something. It's very difficult to describe things that are a sensory thing, that have a certain feeling to it. Sometimes by using language, it can deconstruct it and take the power out of it. The same way music and poetry are much better at describing love than talking about it in words. There's a vibe to poetry, there's a vibe to music that embodies love, because it's coming from a different place. Yeah, I know we're using words to describe it. What I mean is just a different thing. It's not a mechanical thing where you're breaking it down as if it's a science project. It's a vibe. Poetry is a vibe. Music is a vibe. It's a way of conveying a deeper sensation that we have as a human. And I think that potentially this clear light state and this Buddha state, being in this state, we could say, of the luminous mind, it's not something that's very easy to describe in words. And I think it's just something that practitioners experience, some more than others. And it's interesting to think that that is your true state. That is actually your default setting, but everything else takes you out of that. And again, stripping everything down, removing all of these blockages, clearing the mind, focusing your mind, doing these tantric practices, tumo, things like ashtanga yoga, things like Vajrayana Buddhism, things like Tibetan Buddhism, practices that, these yogas of Naropa, these different practices that enable you to get closer to tuning that fork. These practices allow you to get closer to what that feels like. So it's not this mysterious thing, it's something that you are more aware of, and you become much more skilled at focusing your attention on what that feels like. To me, these are the deeper elements of yoga, and these are the deeper elements that we could say we would like to progress into our yoga practices that are well beyond physical. We use the physical, we use asana, we use pranayama, tumo, we use these different things to cultivate prana, we use these different things to create this kind of internal heat in the body so that we're able to use the body to connect the dots. These are, in a way, my rough outline of the stages of yoga. And again, this is not competitive. It's not like trying to be critical if you're not there yet or not. It's not about being anywhere. It's just that we all come to yoga for different reasons, and for lots of us, the different stages are more than enough for what we're looking for in our life. I think it's interesting to think that some of us want to go deeper, and I think it's interesting, and I've always enjoyed studying with teachers that are into that. They're into going deeper. And my experience of yoga, physical asana yoga, is the people that have been interested to go deeper have naturally been a bit drawn to ashtanga yoga. There's something about it, there's a depth to it that is intrinsic in the system itself, and I've always enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed going deeper into certain practices rather than having lots of more superficial ones. To me, they've been less powerful and less transformative. The Ashtanga system, as I've said many times, is a very transformative practice, and I think it works really well with forms of Buddhism, meditation, Vajrayana, especially the tantric side of Buddhism. It works very well for non-monastic people, and the kind of use of language and the use of the breath and the way it's visualized, I think these work exceptionally well, and it's worked very well for me, I would say, and that's something I really enjoy, of balancing those two practices out. Maybe I've said enough on that. I'm just checking a few notes, but maybe I've said enough on this today. Okay, ciao.